Right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our board training session. We're going to be joined today by two industry experts to talk about risk avoidance and how that's going to help you as board members and your overall community. You'll note that you are muted tonight, but you do have availability to use the chat feature to ask any questions along the way. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat for questions, and we'll try to have time at the end to review those. If we do run out of time tonight, we will follow up with you by email afterwards. So without any further delay, I want to turn the session over to our two presenters. We have Susan Lopez with the Social Insurance Agency and Connor Doyle with Vive.
One of the main purposes of today's meeting is to help familiarize people who may not have heard of Vive before or heard but not necessarily understand what it is that we do and why it's so vital, and it's a vital service that Cadden provides. So I just want to walk you through kind of who we are, what we're here to do, and also talk a little bit about risk management. And since we have an expert insurance expert, sorry for saying that word twice, and Susan on the call, I'm sure she'll interject as I go through this presentation, because we want to make this as dynamic as possible. But first, I want to start with who we are, because I think that's as important as what we do. Vive is a company that was started and is maintained by industry professionals. I myself am in my 22nd year in the association management industry. I spent most of that time owning my own management company, running management companies in Phoenix, Arizona, and elsewhere in the country. The president of Vive, Joe Bushy, who's also its founder, is third generation management company owner, kind of similar to the situation with Cadden, actually. And as a company, we have more than 80 years of combined experience specifically within the association management world. This is where we are. We're not a company that came in from outside and decided to start working with HOAs and condos. We are people who worked on HOAs and condos and decided to move into this area because we saw a real need with the companies that we were running before. So our main role can best be summarized by a very simple statement, which is that every single time a vendor steps foot on your property, there is a possibility of your association's assets being exposed to loss. And I think we think a lot about this, like in terms of trips and falls and things like that. But on a larger scale, the association's insurance policy is exposed if someone who is uninsured is on property. So what we are looking to do is mitigate that threat by ensuring that every vendor who goes onto your property is properly insured, licensed for the work that they're going to do, in good standing with the feds, that they are a legitimate business as far as we can tell, because we do not only have a history in our industry nationwide, but specifically in Arizona, pretty nasty history, thankfully decades ago, of embezzlement and things like that. And what we're trying to look for is to just make sure that we are going into these business relationships with vendors with everybody being understanding of each other's obligations, and that they are coming to the table to protect themselves and their work in the event of anything happening. We have seen in the last 6 to 7 years a historic increase in commercial insurance premiums. I know that when I got involved in this industry in the early 2000s, commercial package policies were really, really inexpensive, particularly for HOAs, but even for condos. We were seen largely as a low risk part of the commercial insurance world. We had really agreeable premiums. The punishment wasn't too great if you had claims. And for a long time, I think we all operated both on a operational level, but also on a financial management level, not really expecting insurance to become a huge problem. But as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, we're no longer in that type of environment. Across the country, insurance rates have almost doubled in the last 5 years. We've also seen a lot of policies start to have exemptions for natural disasters, other types of things. And it is because the number of claims that we've had in our country and the expense of those claims are at higher levels than they've ever been before. And there is really no prospect of them going down. The secondary insurance market has also decided that they don't love American risk as much as they used to. So we are really caught in the crosshairs here. And primarily everyone's concern is the financial future of your association. How are you going to contend with the prospect of increased insurance increases? This is something I am sure a lot of you have given a lot of thought to. but we must also try and make sure that we are protecting the loss run of the association. So those variables that are within our control are being mitigated as much as possible. But it's not just uh, associations who are facing these increases. Your vendors, the vendors that you are utilizing every single day, are operating in the same commercial insurance world that you are. They too are facing huge premium increases. And in addition to that, inflation and all of the other economic distress that we're facing, there has never been more financial pressure on small businesses in America right now. The vendors that you work with are primarily small businesses. And we have to expect that what is already a difficult situation with a lot of under and uninsured vendors out there becoming a worse one as the pressure increases them on cost, but they don't necessarily want to increase what they're charging you. So there are, we already discussed one of the main importances here is that this is exposure. If I used to manage the finances of associations, and I always wanted to try and arrive at as much cost certainty as you can. Obviously, that's not really possible. But what you are going to try and look to do is see how few things can come in and attack the financial health of the association. Any unexpected loss, and that loss in the case of an insurance claim is going to be measured as a deductible, but sometimes it isn't worth filing an insurance claim. You could just have a settlement. These are all large unexpected expenses that can really damage the viability of an association. It can mess up your plans. It can lead to assessment increases. So we view managing the exposure from outside third parties to the assets of the association as of paramount importance for responsible governance. Also, part of the reason that we're here is that this is not something that can be taken lightly. Obviously, I'm hopefully corresponding to you the grave importance of risk management for your associations. Well, in order to properly mitigate those risks for you and to put you in a position where you can be confident in the vendors that you have, this requires expertise and it requires time. And that is where a company like Vive comes in, is that this is all we do. We are here to handle risk management for vendors. We are here to check their policies and licenses. We do this every day. We have systems in place to ensure that the work we're doing is credible and reliable. And we also have human beings on the other ends of those systems who are properly licensed. I myself am a licensed insurance agent. We have licensed risk managers who are overlooking policies. We are putting our reputation and our errors and omissions policy on the line every time we approve a vendor. So in order to do this properly for associations, you really need to have a dedicated force in order to do it. And finally, I think I've done a pretty good job of saying this already. Things are tough. They're only going to get tougher. We really are at a point right now where I think, this is obviously you as board members. It's ultimately your job to figure out the priorities you have for your community and for your board. But I really just think that managing risk is the most important thing that you can do as you try and navigate these difficult waters for you and your neighbors. So specifically, areas of concerns for boards that we're concerned with is increased scrutiny from insurers. As these costs have gone up and as claims have skyrocketed, insurers are going to be less likely to simply take something at face value. They are going to look into situations. They are going to ask important questions if a claim arises. One of those fundamental questions is, did you have a robust vendor compliance process in place? And if you didn't, this could be potentially something that could lead to some downstream consequences. One of those consequences is also access to affordable policies in the future. Any claims that go against your policy are going to lead to increased policy premiums almost certainly in the future. And right now in Arizona, I don't necessarily think this is as big of a threat, but in California, we are in a situation where it's not just affordable insurance being available for condos and HOAs, it is insurance being available at all. There is a huge issue right now with homeowners associations and condo associations not being able to access policies on the admitted market at all. That is in large part to the wildfires, but it is also the situation in California and the expenses involved in insuring associations have skyrocketed. So we're not just trying to manage price, we are also trying to manage access. there's always the possibility of an audit coming through. You must always be aware that insurance companies are going to try and make sure that you are holding up your end of the contractual bargain you make when you get a policy, when you're granted a policy and when you pay for one. So they are going to be looking into making sure that workers' comp coverage is in place, and that you are doing the types of things that you need to do to protect their policy from any potential claims. And finally, and this is something I cannot stress enough, we have to let you know that as board members, one of the main sort of precepts of this, you're a volunteer. You should not be exposed to any potential individual exposure in your role as a board member. However, the directors and officers policy that you, knock on wood, have, and if you don't have it, it's probably because you've had some claims in the past. But a directors and officers policy is obviously there to ensure that the directors and officers of the association are going to be covered in the event of someone suing them because of something that they did as board members, or the association did. It is really a way to sort of minimize individual exposure. However, one of the core tenets of that coverage is called the business judgment rule. And what the business judgment rule states is that you're not allowed to do anything. When you make a decision, you must make sure that you're doing it in the best interest of the association. And so in situations, and one of the ones that's very germane to us is you decide that you want to hire someone you know to do work that they're not licensed for. Or you know that a vendor doesn't have insurance, but they're cheap and you know them and they've always done a good job in the past. So you decide to ignore Cadden and so, or tell Cadden, you know, you don't want them to go through their vendor compliance program, and you sign a waiver and you bring this person on and something happens. They get hurt, or they cause a liability, and now there's an insurance claim going against your policy. You're at a very high risk for you individually now being exposed because you made a decision that was not in the best interest of the association. So what we really want to say is not only is Vive here to protect the community from the possibility of a loss, it's also here to protect individual board members from having to worry about this stuff. If you can show that this vendor went through a vendor compliance program, and that you were operating, you know, you did your due diligence, and the people that you've put in place did their work, then there is no possibility that anybody could say that this reflects on a decision that you made that was not in the best interest of the association. Real quick, I just want to break down what our process is. It begins with, we have established a vendor compliance program in concert with Cadden that takes into account both the best practices that we've observed nationwide, but also the best practices within the state of Arizona. I myself, I'm in Phoenix. We have a huge number of clients within Arizona. So we really have a firm idea of what the market is in our state. Our goal is to get as much protection as we can without creating such overly burdensome requirements that none of your vendors will pass. Like, there is no point in asking for the moon and not accepting anything less. So what we have done in concert with Cadden is come to what I think are extremely reasonable requirements for general liability, commercial auto, and workers' compensation, all very much in line with what we're seeing other companies in the state require. Every vendor who then registers with us is going to be signing a master service agreement. This master service agreement is really important because it creates a legally binding obligation between the vendor and the management company and all of its associations. What we're trying to do is establish that the vendor is taking full responsibility for their work, for anything that happens on property to them or anybody else as a result of what they do. We are establishing that they are going to have insurance policies that meet the requirements that Cadden has set forth, that they are not going to cancel or alter those policies after getting approved. If they do, they've now committed fraud. And we also want to establish that their insurance policy has blanket coverage. And what this means is that we're going to say, you, as per this contract, you are covering all associations under management with Cadden. This prevents us from having multiple points of failure and needing to go out and get an individual certificate of insurance that names every association that this vendor is working for. This is one of the main reasons that programs will fall apart, is you're adding all of this administrative burden. You're also increasing the possibility that someone misses a step. So in our program, what we're doing is we're collecting one master certificate of insurance for every vendor that works with Cadden that covers all associations as per the contract. We have that named on the certificate. This is a best practice here to ensure that you are covered. We're then going to, after the process of getting that vendor service agreement signed, we are then going to go and get the insurance certificate directly from the insurance agent. Susan and I were just talking about it before this call, about how important it is to go directly to the agent. Susan, you want to butt in here real quick and talk about why you think that's so important?
Yeah, absolutely, Connor. Hi, everybody. You'll get me later, but I've been doing this for 15 years. I was in commercial insurance for 14 years, meaning also doing like contractors and landscapers and electricians and plumbers and painters, every kind of vendor that most communities are going to hire for maintenance and repairs. And it didn't happen a lot, but there were a handful of times when I would write a commercial policy for, let's say, a painter. And like 2 months later, when we wrote the policy, we gave them a certificate, and 2 months later, they canceled for non-pay. Well, that vendor now has a certificate showing they've got a year-long policy, maybe October to October. And if they have that in hand and they give it to a manager or maybe to a board, it's like, look, I have insurance, here's my proof. You won't know if that policy is still enforced. So I teach, and when I'm talking to my boards and I'm talking to my managers, absolutely, if you're going to get any kind of proof of insurance, don't get it directly from the vendor, get it directly from their insurance agent. And most of my commercial guys, they didn't have time to go chasing that, like find their certificates. They mostly, when there was an emailed request for evidence of insurance, they just forwarded it to me at the agent's office, and I would submit it directly to the manager or the property or the board, whoever was requesting it, and copy my GC on it, so that they knew it was taken care of, and I went in and I would give them the proof of insurance. Only one time did I get asked for requests for proof of insurance, and I had to turn around and say we hadn't had them covered since X date. So it's just another safeguard that Connor's talking about. He makes sure to get it from the actual agent, because once the agent is sending it, they're the agent of record. So now it's on that agency's, shoulders if the policy was not enforced. It's their responsibility.
Thanks, Susan. And so in addition to that, we're also not just taking those certificates at face value. We have licensed risk managers at Vive who are going to be looking over that policy to ensure it meets the standards of the program set forth by Cadden, and that there's nothing out of sync or wrong with that policy that may create a coverage issue. And then we're going to be tracking those policies on an ongoing basis. So if a vendor is showing up as approved for Cadden or your association, you can be sure that we have evidence that they are insured on that date. And that if at any point in time their policy lapses and we're not able to get a renewal, we will suspend that vendor until we're able to get that resolved. Finally, in addition to the work we're doing on insurance, we are doing license verification. When vendors sign up with us, they get to tell us up to 11 trades that they work within. If any of those trades require a license in the state of Arizona, we will need proof of that license, and then we're going to independently verify that that license is still current during the validation process. We also do what we call a public data screening, where we're checking the Secretary of State's page to just make sure that this is actually a business. This isn't some sort of fake shell company that someone set up. And we are also doing a tax ID check with the feds to ensure that when we go to give them a 1099 at the end of the year, that's not going to get returned because they don't know who that is. So one thing that I don't want to shy away from is, obviously there's a lot of benefit here for individual associations and for the management company, but the vendors are the ones who are paying to utilize Vive. So we want to make sure that there is value involved in this for the vendors themselves. The primary one is marketing. Because of the way we've set things up, a vendor needs to only get approved with Cadden once to have access to all of its associations. So if a vendor is working with just you right now and your board, they're now getting exposure and the possibility of increased revenue with what I believe is the largest management company in Tucson. It's certainly the largest independent management company in Tucson. There's also a vendor savings program. Every vendor who signs up for Vive is automatically given access to an entirely free program. It's a national cooperative of independent contractors where that allows them access to group discounts on things that they use every day. Things like payroll processing, credit card processing, materials, the list goes on, fuel. In one quarter last year alone, Vive vendors saved more than $25,000 on fuel. It's a great program. It's one that we're trying to get as many people to be a part of because it'll only make the entire program better for everyone. And it's our goal that what that vendor spends on an annual basis in order to be an approved vendor, they'll get a return on that investment either through increased business through Cadden or through the savings they can get in the program. Before wrapping up the Vive part of this, I just wanted to cover some frequently asked questions, and we will have a little Q&A session, I think, later on. But I also wanted to I do this a lot, so we do get a lot of the same questions, and I just want to be able to answer them right now. The first is probably the one that most of you are thinking about, is that you have some small vendors, maybe whether they're small because the work that they do doesn't like net them a lot of money, or that they're small, it's a mom and a pop, it's a chuck and a truck, and that you come to rely on small vendors as an association because oftentimes their costs are lower, they get better service. I completely understand. I was in your shoes, and we aren't anti-small vendor here at Vive. But we also need to speak plainly about the risks that you face. If you're only working, and if Cadden was only working with large corporate vendors, multi-state vendors who have big booths at the CAI, industry trade shows, you don't need me to tell you they're insured. You still would need to go through the work to make sure that you're named as an additionally insured party. But ultimately, we know that they have their stuff together. Almost all of the risk that you face as an association come from small vendors, because those are the vendors with not only the financial pressure, but oftentimes they may not actually know what they need to do in order to be properly insured. One of the truths about running a business is that insurance is the one expense that you have that offers no possibility of revenue. You can't make any money off of it. It is solely done for the purposes of your clients. And if you're running a business and times are tight and you're trying to save costs, losing your insurance policy doesn't change your ability to do the work. It only changes the consequences of what happens if something goes wrong while you're doing your work. So Vive only really exists because of small vendors. There is a possibility, if you need to, where you can ask Cadden to give you a waiver where you hold harmless Cadden for anything to do with a vendor and you take full responsibility. But I want you to know what you're signing. You are now taking full responsibility if something happens with that vendor. If they are uninsured and something bad goes on, you could, again, potentially be in a spot of personal liability. Obviously, the association and its insurance policy would be exposed. So we are not punishing small vendors. We are just trying to be realistic about the situation that we see out there with small businesses in America, and make sure that your little nonprofit corporation does not become a victim knowingly, unknowingly, accidentally, doesn't matter. Any type of loss is only going to end up costing you and your neighbors a lot of money, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Sort of on a similar vein, what happens when it's just a one-time job or a small job? And the thing that I'll ask you is, please talk to your manager. I know there are a lot of boards and you're used to just going out and finding vendors on your own. And what we want to express is that you now have a resource through your manager with Vive to access vendors who are already approved. And there are no hoops to jump through. There's nothing to worry about. They've already gone through this process and they are ready to work at your association right now. So if you do need a small job, an odd job, an HVAC, something along those lines, what I would ask is, please just talk to your manager. See if there is a solution within our system that will not require any more work on anybody's behalf. Now, if for some reason you can't find a vendor who's approved that will either be able to do the work that you need to do or service your property, whatever that may be, what we want to impress upon you is that the risk calculus doesn't change. Every time someone's on your property, there's risk. So that one time, there's as much risk as the one time a landscaper visits or the one time your pool guy comes over. And oftentimes those one-time jobs are not small jobs. I often think about actually HVAC as one of those things that you don't use HVAC all but maybe once every 10 years. But obviously it's a big expensive job. A huge liability can occur from work that's improperly done. So that is not a small job. In terms of small jobs, you may decide that a waiver is worth your while in that situation, but what we would just like you to do is at least exhaust the options available to you that are not potentially increasing exposure for the association. Another one is, I'm sure a couple of you are thinking, this is all fine and good. Isn't it Cadden's job to do this? Why aren't they paying for Vive? And the simple answer is it's not actually Cadden's job to do it, and you're not paying them to do it, so they don't have resources to pay us to do it. This is one of those little, I like to call it an unfunded mandate, where there is an obligation for the board to carry out this work. As part of your association's insurance policy, is that you are supposed to verify that the vendors that you're working with are insured. But you're also lay people. You're not really expected to do that work yourself. You hire a management company, but management companies are not insurance experts either. They are management companies, and the job of a management company is to be the third party that connects you to other parties to handle your work. So you don't hire Cadden to cut your lawn. You hire Cadden to find people to cut your lawn and then to manage and pay them. So similarly, we just have a situation here in which this work needs to be done, and it's important work that needs to be done professionally. But management company isn't charging you for it. They're certainly not charging you for the potential liability of them getting it wrong, because that is a potential liability in the tens of thousands of dollars if a management company gets sued. So where we step in here is that we are attempting to professionalize something that has not been given a lot of thought in the past, but should have been, and do it at an affordable price to vendors, since no one else in the equation really wants to pay. We understand the management company, anything that they do, they just charge you for. And so they're not putting that in their management fees. Similarly, as an association, these are not costs that you yourself would like to incur. So that is the reason that our business model is the way it is. We have done everything we can to keep the price to value ratio for vendors as optimal as we can. It's not a lot of money for an annual fee to work with the 100+ associations under Cadden's management. And we just feel it is a square deal for everyone. Finally, our vendors won't do it. That's it. You've had a vendor, you've worked with them for 7 years, and they just said in no uncertain terms, they will not do this for whatever reason. And you've decided that this relationship is important enough that you don't want to look elsewhere to potentially find an approved vendor, someone who has gone through the process. As I mentioned earlier, there is a waiver process that you can do for whatever circumstance. If the board wishes to sign that waiver to ensure that Cadden is going to be held harmless in the event of anything going wrong, and that you are acknowledging that you are taking on that responsibility, you do have the ability to create those exceptions. But it goes without saying, I certainly hope it's rare, and that when it's done with a lot of thought to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks. So I'm going to sort of stop there. And why don't I sort of open this back up here? Susan, you've listened to me talk for a while. Is there anything that you would like to add, or just any additions that you have to anything that I've said?
No, not really. I think you hit it. I think, yeah, from a vendor perspective and checking insurance, it's really important.